Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get our site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I have the same crew with me this week as I did last week. My name is Brian Vitale, and joining me, I've got Jess Reyes.
Again.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
And Chow Min Woo.
Hello.
So as of this week, we have been, as a site collectively, basically been bulldozing through a ton of Pokemon Legends Arceus work. For me, it's mostly just been playing it myself, as it's been, as I stated last week on the podcast. For people like James and Andrea, they've been putting out so many guides up on our website for different tips and tricks, how to get certain Pokemon. Obviously, people have been sharing on, their experiences to their social media channels and to YouTube and to Twitter. So I feel like even though it was kind of a major topic last week, as we talked about James and Jess's time with Pokemon Legends Arceus, it will likely be the same this week as we just continue to talk about our experiences with the game. I've now had a chance to play it a bit. And there have been a few other releases this week or upcoming releases, but they're either under embargo or that we haven't been able to get hands on with them yet. So not able to discuss them here on this podcast. So a little more of the same topics with Pokemon here. And I think it is the sort of game that's worth a couple podcasts in a row. So I'm not, against that in any way. And I guess we'll just kind of start off with that. Instead of starting off with me talking about my experiences with the game so far, because mine might kind of, since I'm a little bit behind where Jess and James are, because I just recently started in the last week where you two are further along than I am, I'll go ahead and kind of hand it off to maybe James, because I know James has been basically our bedrock. I don't know if that's the right word for all the different things that he's noticed in the game, some of the late game things he's been able to achieve. And I just don't know, how has your experience or your opinion on the game changed as you got further and further in, and once you started reaching some of the end game goals of the experience?
So I'll just say this, and I think I said this last week. The only major issue, and not even a major issue, I can say for Legends Arceus is that it does lack some of the things that maybe players are familiar with and big fans of in the older games. And even though this is a mainline title, there are aspects of it that do make it feel like a bit of a spin-off in the sense that there's less trainer battles, there's no multiplayer battling, there's less caves, even though everything's way more open and there is exploration. There's one cave in the entire game. Maybe two if you count one that's a hallway. And it definitely feels as great as Arceus is, and I really do enjoy it quite a bit. It's probably my favorite Pokemon game since the DS. You can very clearly tell that in many ways this was a kind of, best way to put it, a prototype for what's to come, kind of like a testing ground, if you will. And there's going to be a lot of people that even if they enjoy what the game does, they're going to notice all those little things where it's yeah, this is not fully baked yet. There's many things from older games that maybe they like that just aren't represented. And I can't really blame them for maybe being disappointed in the game from that aspect. But for me, it's definitely my favorite Pokemon game in quite a while.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with sorry, I was just gonna continue on. But yeah, I also agree that it's honestly one of my it's one of my favorites in a long time. Mostly because it does kind of the catch 'em all aspect is still there, of course. It's a little bit different from what players are used to, but I actually kind of like that. It's kind of to me it's kind of like a history of sorts, because for example, I guess people wouldn't really be expected to have as many trainer battles because people are kind of afraid of Pokemon back in the day. But it's kind of like a lore, if you will, that kind of it gave me that kind of feel like this is the lore of the Diamond and Pearl games of later on. But yeah, I think the biggest issues that I've seen people complain about in general are the graphic stuff, which I get. There's some Pokemon they kind of glitch in and out of the ground, or flying Machop. Okay,
I haven't seen that.
You might eventually. but I don't think it's too like it doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the game too much. Like it kind of makes it hard to aim Pokeballs if if the Pokemons are glitching in and out of the ground, but otherwise, like for the most part, honestly, I didn't even realize that was a problem until later on in the game. And then the other thing that people complain about is the side quests. Just because I think they specifically complain about the ones that are kind of bugged or RNG based, which I understand. But for the most part, I'm happy with them because many of the side quests have to do with stuff that you would naturally do if you want to complete the Pokedex. Like, oh, I want to see a Roselia. Please catch one and let me look at it. That makes sense to me as a side quest because, like, well, the player's gonna do that anyway. It's not like sure people could say it's like a fetch quest, but I don't think it's like too much of a. It's not too out of the player's way. Some of the ones that are difficult that people still ask questions about and people write guides about is for example, the Big Weasel quest. Um, and that one has to do with like you basically need to keep catching Weasel until you get one that's big enough for this guy to approve of. So,
I've
maybe
actually
later.
I haven't played the game, but I've seen people talking about like they can't find the big weasel, and it's like without context, kind of funny.
I would say one thing about that quest that is kind of poorly designed is that you can actually see the dude's weasel next to him, and it's like, okay, so here's a benchmark for a weasel that needs to be bigger than that, and then you go out into the wild and you catch a weasel that is very clearly bigger, but the size of the person's weasel in the village and the size that it's actually supposed to be aren't quite the same, and just confuses people, and it's like super strict. It's like, I don't know.
Okay, that does make sense to me that would be a problem because I caught an Alpha Magikarp, right? And then I evolved it into an Alpha Gyarados. But apparently the Alpha Gyarados is supposedly shorter than my regular Gyarados, which obviously doesn't make sense. But if you put them next to each other in real life, like outside of the Pokeballs, the Alpha Gyarados is obviously bigger looking. So that doesn't really make sense to me either.
So it seems like the whatever randomized height or size number that it's attached to them isn't actually reflected in their model or something like that.
Yeah, I guess.
And what I was going to say, like when you're talking about the side quests, so I am about 8 hours into the game. I am like in the second region. I've just got the Ursalana, and I have been. This is the sort of game I've mentioned on the podcast several times, and there are a few different contexts where I like games that sort of shut up and just let you play. And this game does have a pretty strong story, and there are still a decent number of cutscenes. And some of it is a little bit of inane like chatter or a little bit too tutorialized, I think, because there's still games for children. But I am just kind of enjoying like, all right, now if I don't want to do the next main task or whatever it's called, I can just roam around and see what's available and then go back out at night and see if I can find any of the wisps or see what ghost type Pokemon appear at night or whatever. And I kind of really do agree that the side quests they're on paper. There's nothing too exciting about them. It's like you said, I want to see this Pokemon or I want to see this Dex entry. Some of them are a little bit more like, hey, if you go to this beach at night, I want you to see what's going on with the Drifloon there. Or I saw a wisp in a tree and it ends up being like a starter from another region. Like, oh, that side quest was how I got access to another region starter. And I do think that you're right when you say it's just stuff that you would be engaging with anyways, where if someone's asking for, I want you to show me a Hippodon or Hippopotas, you might already even have it. And like, here, I'll show you it. Or you might already even have the Dex entry for a certain Pokemon that someone wants to see. And like, all right, I'll show it to you. Or there's been a few side quests where they're looking for a certain number of items and you might already have them. And if you don't have them, it's usually not too onerous to go get them. I've never really run into anything where it's like, oh, this is going to be such a grind to fulfill this for an item I don't need. Maybe that occurs later on if the complexity goes up a bit, but so far I've had really no issue with the side quests. If I don't think they're interesting or I don't like the reward, I just don't do them. And sometimes I'll just go back later and be like, oh, I happen to fight a few more of that Pokemon now, and now I have a complete Pokedex entry, so I'll show it to you. One thing that has been a bit of an adjustment for me is that normally when I played the classic Pokemon games, I usually didn't do much of like catching several different versions of the same Pokemon to get a good nature, or I would usually kind of like decide out my team and then not even really bother catching Pokemon that I wasn't interested in, because completing the Pokedex, the sort of reward that you get for it was usually like an in-game like certificate or something, and I was like, I don't need that. or a trainer card that with a different number of stars on it. But here it's been really kind of interesting where it's like you are super incentivized to catch 3, 4, 5, 6 of the same Pokemon or continue to battle them. I remember when I first looked at the Pokedex entries in Arceus, and it's like, how many have you battled? 1, 2, 4, 7, 10, 20. I'm like, am I expected to actually battle 20 of these? The answer is no, because usually you can fill out the Pokedex pretty easily without capping out all the different records you can get. But it was just a bit of a kind of like a mindset adjustment where it's like you are going to catch tons of extras. You are going to battle wild Pokemon way more than trainer Pokemon, which is almost like flipped on its head from my experience in the other games. And I kind of actually like that too, where when I run into a trainer battle where a trainer has multiple Pokemon, it almost actually feels a little bit more like an event rather than just like knocking out trainers on a certain route and like, oh, better clear them all out before they spot me. So I've actually been kind of enjoying the ways that it's making me like rethink what I kind of expected or anticipated out of a Pokemon game.
So I haven't played this yet. Why are you incentivized to catch like more than one of the same type?
Because when you go to a Pokedex entry, there usually be like 6 or 8 different tasks that basically fill out your record of that Pokemon. The first 2 that are very common are how many have you defeated or how many have you caught. So irrespective of anything else, if you catch or defeat, at least in my experience so far, a certain number of Ghastlies, and as long as you do that enough, you will fill out the Pokedex entry for Ghastly. Now, there might also be some alternate objectives like seen Ghastly use Hypnosis or defeated with a Ghost type move or whatever, where you can like, instead of catching 8 or 9 of them, you can catch 2, but then do some of the other objectives instead that are a little bit more written out to fill out their Pokedex entry too. And then usually there's also like a bonus that you get if you capture a male and a female of the same species. So you're at least incentivized to do that. That's basically how it is. I thought at first I almost had almost like an eye roll when I'm like, am I going to be expected to catch 20 Ghastlies before I get my Pokedex rank maxed? And it's like, no, you don't have to. It's usually well less than that to get the Pokedex filled up. You couldn't still do that to knock that off the record, but as far as I can tell, there's no incentive to fully filling out as long as you get enough points to cap out the entry. And I guess it is really kind of interesting where I was revisiting some areas in the very first region again, near where you fight the Cleavor boss from the trailers. And there was like a little path that I hadn't gone on before. And all of a sudden I saw Scythers at the end of the grove. And I thought that was actually pretty cool, where it's something where every Pokemon game that I've played has not had roaming Pokemon like Let's Go or wild areas. So like the equivalent of that feeling in a classic game is a specific patch of grass that might be shaped in a rectangle where that's where Scythers are found or whatever. But no, and here it's like you see them from a distance and you're like, oh shit, Scythers. And it's part of that where I'm actually kind of like, I feel, this is going to sound super corny, but like I feel like a kid again or whatever. And it sounds like James is kind of right, where this is like the framework. This is the rubric that other games can be built to, even if it might not be fully featured. It's calling it a beta is a little bit too much, but it does sort of feel like, all right, the framework's in place. We're going to test it out. We're going to see the response. We're going to and we'll iterate from here. And that's where I think this is kind of exciting, is where you could go from this. Now, I haven't completed the story. I haven't really seen how that tracks. I do think some of the crafting is a little bit too much. Like I've used a few like food items or stun items, but maybe I'm not far enough in the game, but I haven't found them that useful. I've been crafting a lot of potions and Pokeballs, but not like food or stunning items or things like that. And you just kind of keep unlocking recipes, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I need any of this. But maybe I just haven't been inventive enough to figure out how it really helps or something like that.
I guess like when it comes to stun items, I noticed recently, like my favorite is the smoke ball, because then you could sneak up on bigger Pokemon and kind of catch them without even engaging with them. But you could also technically stun them, and I was like, oh, that might be a better idea sometimes. So I don't need to keep, because for example, the smoke ball, the item, like the plants for it, don't pop up as often as the other ones for the stunning. So, but then again, I kind of wish that certain things didn't cost so much money, like the recipes, or that guy who keeps asking, do you want to pay like like 20,000 Poke for another space in your bag, and I'm like, it'd be nice if I could use the money to like, experiment with my clothes or, buy those super expensive recipes or like, kind of like that.
Yes, so I actually do think the economy in this game is pretty interesting. There are 3 things to really spend money on: items or recipes. I'm counting that as one thing. Fashion. So like if you wanted to, you could really spend a ton of money on clearing out the fashion shop. Or what's the last one? Oh yeah, the item things like you mentioned.
The
Where
bad guy.
yeah, where I kept thinking that first of all, he's like, give me 500. What I don't know what it is in the Pokemon universe. Is any? Give me 500 gold and I'll fill it by 1 slot. Oh, give me 1,000. I'm like, all right, I'll just keep going through this. And eventually, it's like, give me 5,000. I'm like, all right, it's gotta end sometime soon, right? And nope, it just
Goes
keeps going and
high.
going. Yeah, and so that's like the biggest money sink. But there's actually been times where I'm only in the second region where it's like you can't pick up this item because your satchel's full. Um, so you do end up with a lot of different materials, and unfortunately, I'm in a place where I'm not using a lot of them because all the different like types of tumblestone to make different sorts of Pokeballs. Like I got sky tumblestones, which make the feather balls or something like that. I'm like, I'm not using these, but I guess I picked one up somewhere, so now it's sitting in a spot in my satchel until I drop it off.
Yeah.
So inventory management is, I kind of like it in practice, but here I just wish the items that you made out of the materials were a little bit more useful. That's kind of
Gotcha.
where I'm at.
I feel like I don't really use the heavy balls or feather balls much either. I'm kind of because first off, the heavy balls you kind of need to be really, really near the Pokemon to use them effectively, which I find annoying. And in the feather balls, I'm just kind of like I've never been in a situation where I used one and I was like, wow, that was so much better than regular Great Ball. So I personally don't use them.
Yeah, I've been using just regular Pokeballs and Great Balls, and those ones are pretty easy to get the materials for. So it's like, all right, I'm fine with this. So have you
Hearing this talk about like resource management and crafting and stuff in a Pokemon game sounds wild to me.
I mean, I like that you can craft it.
Yeah, and I wish there was maybe I just haven't run into a situation yet, or I haven't been taking the initiative to try things out. But a lot of like the food lures, where it's like you can give someone dazzling honey or whatever, I haven't really found a reason to use those much, unless you really want to get like the backstrike with throwing a Pokeball, I guess. Maybe I'm just impatient. Usually I'm just kind of like, all right, I'll just throw a Pokeball, and if it doesn't go in, I'll just throw a second one, or I'll battle them and then use false swipe and then get it, rather than like crafting and preparing a lure and going in and using that, or even like a smoke ball. I don't think I've got the smoke ball recipe yet. Maybe I do.
I did use the lures for skittish Pokemon. Like, for example, I could not get close enough to Eevee. Like, I chased it away twice before I found it the third time and lured it with the honey
see an
cake.
Eevee. Maybe that's a good point, because you mentioned last week that you saw an Eevee, but it ran away. And
Yeah.
maybe that's a good point, because like here I am saying like, oh, I haven't found a reason to use a lure, but also that Eevee ran away and I was hoping to find it again and I haven't. So no, that's a good one. And there might be others that I learned once I'm starting to look for more of the rare Pokemon. That's one thing that might be interesting. Kind of like I've gone through the first region. I was reasonably thorough, I think. But then I can't. I'm imagining like once I'm at a point where I'm filling out the Pokedex and it's, oh, you can catch those there. I never saw one because I didn't go to the right place at the right time or use the right tools or whatever. Or maybe I had to return once I had like swimming capability or something like that. Or like it was a shaking tree, and I always just seem to get Burmese on those. I'm like, all right, that's boring, but maybe there's something really cool on those I can get. Speaking of, I still have yet to find a female Combee. I even went to like a Combee breakout event and I couldn't find one, and I think you need a female one to evolve it. So that's another one that's kind of on my like white whale list, where I'm like, why are all these Combees guys? I don't want these. And I'm sure there'll be other breakout events in the other maps. So I do think it's kind of cool that they have a little bit, a pretty good sense of variety in how certain Pokemons are found. Some at night, some at day. There seems like there are some weather effects, like with fog or rain, and I don't know if that affects which Pokemon appear, and if that's random or if that's just for flavor. Like, it's raining today.
In the post game, there's some legendary Pokemon that can only spawn in a location if a certain weather effect is going on.
Okay, I'm not surprised. I was actually kind of looking around. I think I was in the first area, but it was super foggy, and I was like, "Is this just the time of day, or is this like something a new Pokemon's around?" And I couldn't quite find anything, so I'm like, "All right, maybe that'll come into play later."
Yeah, I think it has to do with I think it matters for certain Pokemon just because if you look in the Pokedex, like when I was looking at a finished Pokedex entry for Buizel, for example, I was looking, okay, there's like indications for it can spawn during, you know, nighttime, daytime, etc. But there's also like these little icons for different, I guess, weather. So it's like, okay, it will appear when it's raining or sunny or cloudy. And then I was like, well, I guess those are there, assuming that some Pokemon don't appear during certain weather. So.
I guess I should do that. I should pull up the Pokedex and like see. I saw like the region that certain Pokemon appear in. I think I was looking for Ponyta's early on to get that. But then like, oh yeah, I guess it does have. I'm pulling up my game right now. It does have all the weathers listed. It's just that for most of the Pokemon that I've met so far, it's just lists all of them. So I think
Gotcha.
it must just be later in the game. Aha, Ponyta does
Yeah,
not show up when it's raining or snowing. Today I learned. So that makes sense, I
that
guess.
does make sense.
All right, so I'm guessing once I get further into the like the third and fourth regions of the game, like some of the spawn conditions will get a little bit more intricate.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, I mean, like, in addition to that, when we were talking about, it is kind of interesting to revisit old regions. And for example, it was a lot easier to farm Magikarp when I had Basculegion. So I went back to Obsidian Fieldlands, the first place, and was able to jump into water because now I had a ride. I assume, like, I'm gonna go back soon and try that with Sneasel too. So.
I was trying to like fully fill out the first map before I went to the second, but I think there's just some areas you can't get to without Basculegion, which I think is pretty cool. Maybe you can get to them, but it's a lot more convenient once you have the additional traversal mechanic. And it reminds me of that old Dragon Age Origin, or not Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age Inquisition, where it's like leave the hinterlands, leave the first zone, just like push the story, and you'll actually enjoy yourself more than trying to like exhaust the whole first area before you move on to the second. So I'm trying to like uh have that sort of mindset, and I think the game encourages it too because like there's been a few Twitter videos I've seen of this where there's a region in the first area where it's like here's a level 40 alpha Snorlax, we don't watch your back or whatever. So like, all right, I will come back there later. And I
Oh
think
yeah,
it's in
I
a
got that guy.
I think there I'm not high enough level yet, I don't think. I'm not really sure like if I have a great ball and I back attack it, does it matter what level I'm at? Or if it's alpha, I probably have to fight it. I'm not actually sure. I haven't tried. Um, but I do think that the game does kind of encourage you to be like, all right, there it's not like all of the Pokemon in the second region are a higher level than all the Pokemon in the first region. They kind of have like a crossover where once you're around level 20 or so, you can move on to the second region and be around the same level as the Pokemon there. And then you can go back to the first area and go to like some of these places that have level 30 Pokemon or even level 40 alphas. I've only ever
Yeah,
caught one
yeah.
alpha yet. It was a large Cricketot or Cricketune, whatever the evolved version is.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like,
Was that the boss fight?
no, I think I fought one. Yes, you did fight it as a boss fight, but I think I caught one. Did I just catch that? It might have just been that one. And I remember like I was walking by my pasture in the town, and there's just this giant Cricketot just floating around there. So I thought that was just kind of a fun little attention to detail. Uh, I haven't caught
That
any other
just
alphas
reminds
yet.
me.
Go
That
ahead.
just reminds me of like I was in the when I was doing guides last night. Walked past my pasture and I saw Arceus just standing there, and it's like, oh, this is a very funny mental image.
Do you
Like,
have
hi
the
God, how are you
Pokedex?
doing today?
Do you have the Pokedex complete?
I have caught every Pokemon. I have not completed every Pokedex entry.
Oh, is there an incentive to do that, or do you not know yet?
It gets you the shiny charm.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
And
Does that increase the odds of shiny?
that's what I was going to assume.
It does, but honestly, the shiny charm isn't as useful in this game as it was in previous ones because the main method of grinding out shiny Pokemon, like the shiny charm, doesn't actually make that much of a difference compared to the just like base modifier you get from grinding out mass outbreaks.
all right.
There was an early quest This is an early quest, so it's not really much of a spoiler. Where it gets you a shiny Ponyta, but the nature that I got was like really bad. I'm like, oh well, I'll just use my regular Ponyta, because I think Ponyta is a physical attacker, and I got my shiny Ponyta that you get as part of this quest. It's kind of like a freebie, had lowering attack nature. I'm like, Darren, do I reset or do I just not bother? And I just said, not bother. I'll use my regular Ponyta. Red's better, anyways.
Gotcha. I feel like I always fighting with myself. Like, honestly, this game kind of enabled me to be like a perfectionist in that regard because I'm like, I need to catch like maybe like a catching 6 weasels will help me fill out my Pokedex entry anyway. I'll just pick out the one with the best nature and get going.
I've actually did that with I was in the at night on the first area you catch the Drifblims or Drifloons, and I was
Yeah.
I actually like looked up. If you look at my search history, I'm like looking up like which Pokemon is it, a physical attacker or special attacker, because I don't really know like what its stats like align it for, and does the nature match. And I think Weasel is another one where if I don't quote me on this, but I think it has a higher attack than special attack. So I'm like, all right, I better
Yeah.
get one that has the nature for it. And I caught like 6, and the only one that I had that was decent one that like lowered defense and increased speed. I'm like, good enough, as long as it doesn't like lower the attack nature that I want. So yeah, I have been a little bit more diligent in that area than I normally would be, and kind of goes back to like what I said earlier, where normally I just kind of catch one and move on because I'm only really curious about completing the main story, which is I guess the same is true here. But you're encouraged to catch 3 or 4 anyway, so might as well look through them, see which one has the nature that is best suited, and pick that one. I have learned that my team right now is pretty imbalanced, because I have like 3 flying types. I have the starter. I picked Rowlet, and I got a Staravia, and I also have a Driftblim, which I believe is ghost flying. And I was fighting something that like all of these guys are weak to rock. Oh, they're all flying shit or whatever. And so I'm like, I'm trying to like sort out my team a little bit so I don't have quite as big a deficiency there. So I'm having a good time, because normally I just kind of like pick 2 or 3 Pokemon and just bulldoze through. But here I'm actually kind of going over everything that I caught on my excursions, figuring out like what would make a pretty decent, what has good type coverage. The game isn't challenging, but it's not challenging, but I still feel like more engaged than I normally would. I feel like I'm sweeping less often, and maybe I'm just fighting Pokemon that are too high a level, but uh, healing up is usually pretty free, pretty easy, and almost after every trainer battle, they immediately heal up all your Pokemon. So I am finding myself a bit more engaged than I remember being when I played through like regular Platinum or whatever. And the nice thing is that if you're looking to have more of a challenge, you can just push through the map until don't grind up at all, and just keep pushing until the Pokemon level are at your level or higher in the wild, and you'll have just a little bit more of the intended experience, I guess, rather than just sweeping through everything. Or at least I am.
I hate to backtrack on this, but like, I actually think Cyndaquil was not a good starter to pick. Like, when I was playing through Obsidian Fieldlands, the Buizos are water type. The Bidoof typically have rollout, and it was such a annoying experience because I'm like, they keep KOing my Cyndaquil. I was like, maybe I should have thought this through.
No, you made the poor choice. Just kidding. What about other alternative Pokemon? You could have used some other ones. It doesn't have to be Cyndaquil. I
I
mean,
know, but like, I just felt emotionally attached to it because it was my starter.
but there is a. I think when I was playing Pokemon Red back in the day, I beat the entire game with just Charizard alone because all you need is fire. You don't need anything else.
Well,
That's
that's one thing
amazing.
that I feel like I feel like we all did that, or I did that with like Pokemon Gold back in the day, just use my starter. But now it's like I actually value like the team building aspect to it. And it sounds silly, like of course that's what you do in Pokemon or whatever. But I'm actually trying to like instead of just focusing on out leveling the opponent and just brute forcing it by having my my Rowlet, whatever it evolves into, I forget what the middle form is called, have like a flying move, a steel move, a grass move, and whatever else it can learn. I'm actually just trying to at least have the coverage over a whole team. It's just that right now that's 3 flying types. I'm like, I'm probably gonna dump the Staravia, because right now I kind of have that classic Sinnoh team where I have a Weasel, a Staravia, and a Luxray. And I'm like, all right, I need to like change this up a bit. And now that I'm in the second area, I'm probably gonna like throw in maybe a Toxicroak, or just something that I've never used before, something that's not so like Sinnoh basic bitch. Sorry for my language, but that's I felt kind of like that in the first region, and hey, it at least makes it kind of feel like it's the same like geography to have those Pokemon there present in the early game. But trying not to get too attached, I'm like, all right, Staravia, I'm gonna bench you, and or maybe I'll let it evolve first, and then I'll bench you and put in a Hippowdon or something like that. Or maybe I'll use the extra starters that I found as you get through the game and you get the other region starters. I guess the only thing
You
we're
know,
really not talking about much is, and maybe there really isn't much to talk about here, but the story. Right now, where I'm at, the story is basically you've got the Galaxy team kind of serving as like intermediaries between Clan Diamond and Clan Pearl. That's actually hard to say, Clan Pearl, and it seems like very wishy-washy. Like everyone's chummy and bros and friends in one moment, and then they're like, we hate that Clan Diamond, we don't want to partner with them in the next breath. And I sort of get what they're doing. It's basically that they both one of them, I forget which is which, they believe that the Lord Sinnoh is the Lord of Time, and the other one believes it's the Lord of Space. It's kind of being referential to Palkia and Dialga in an indirect way before they knew much about them. But I feel like it's fine. I'm not really engaged with it at all. I don't think I was really ever expecting to be, so I'm not disappointed. But just wondering if you had any other thoughts on the story, Jess.
oh, I mean, I think it flows pretty reasonably, and I think, I feel like the most interesting part is that it's an isekai, but otherwise, I mean, I guess it's nice that it's not just like, a crime syndicate is trying to take over the region or anything like that. And it's kind of like creating peace between clans, creating peace with Pokemon, and that's interesting, but it's a children's game, so it's not going to be as emotionally evocative as like, some other JRPG made by Square Enix or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's suited for what it is. It's fine. I don't think I really expected anything more or really even need anything more. In fact, if it was a little bit quieter, I think I would have enjoyed it more. But I'm still pretty early, so we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, like I haven't rolled credits yet, so I haven't seen the complete ending, but so far I feel like that I'm satisfied with it. But the highlight for me is the gameplay.
Mm-hmm. James, you have any other final thoughts on Arceus for this week?
Nothing really, because the stuff I would want to talk about is more like spoiler stuff from like the post game and whatnot. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I just hope that going forward the games are more like this.
So
It would be interesting to have for example, a modern version where Pokemon can actually hurt you. Imagine that. I feel like I don't know how it'd work really because Pokemon are like your friends in the future, but I wonder.
So as James and Jess and now I have been going through this game, I have not contributed to these, but James has a ton. We've got a ton of guides up on rpgsite.net about how to evolve specific Pokemon. If you're looking to fill out your Pokedex or hunt for shinies, the method that James alluded to earlier, that's all up on the site. And hopefully it'll end up helping you out. And I have already looked up a few things, even though I'm also looking up just kind of like the Bulbapedia pages for natures at this point. But as soon as I start looking at like holes in my Pokedex, I'm very certain that I will be referencing those. So thank you so much, James, and also Andrea and Alex, who have also been assisting on those, because we have a ton of work up on the site for that.
I actually don't know if Andrea has done any Pokemon guides yet. It's definitely mostly been Alex and myself. Like,
actually, maybe Andrea's been doing just the Genshin guides. I know
She's
she's been
on
working on
Genshin
some
still.
other stuff.
Yeah.
So
Well, that does make sense considering the 2.5 update. She might be busy with it, looking up stuff for that.
And more on that later. So that's what the three of us have been playing this week. Last week we kind of took a tangent and talked about Adam playing a little bit of Star Ocean. Have you finished what you were doing, or is that pretty much where you were? I don't know, where did you leave off on that game?
Yeah, so the last week I mostly was doing like post game sort of stuff, which I mentioned, Star Ocean games have pretty extensive post-game dungeons, post-game bosses. They get kind of nuts and crazy in terms of like stat inflation or what have you. So I was doing that, and I just finished. So maybe I'll start Arceus or however you pronounce it, next week. We'll see. But there's a lot of games coming out in the next few months.
Yeah, we have
yeah.
we have Kingdom Hearts for Switch coming out in a week.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna play that.
I still need to play my PC versions of those at some point.
You know, do you think they're gonna improve the cloud version of it? I don't know. I heard drama about it not being as optimized as people hoped.
They cared about how it performed on Switch. They wouldn't have done a cloud version.
This is Square Enix you're talking about. You're giving them too much credit.
The demo that came out, the thing is that I don't know how cherry picked it was because I didn't play it myself, but I saw people sharing like some really bad lag and stutter and just not a good experience all around for those. Maybe the full release will be better, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of optimism. And then Chow, I believe the games that you've been playing this week you can't talk about till next week. Am I correct on that?
No, probably at least 2 months from now. Well, not 2 months, a month and a half.
Oh, okay. Well, we will move on from a slightly abbreviated games talk section as we just work our way through Pokemon Arceus and go through our experience on that. Maybe we'll round out with one more quick talk, and maybe not necessarily next week, but as we get the crew together, maybe I'll finish through it and Adam will start it, and we'll kind of see what our final thoughts are on that. Maybe halfway through the month, and we'll go into the news section. Now, news this week, we did have a very surprising, unexpected kind of headliner here, and that is that Square Enix announced another game that is releasing in about 2 weeks, and that is Voice of Cards, The Forsaken Maiden, which we did not know anything about this, and obviously just a few months ago, we got Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars, so little did we know that this is going to be some sort of like, is it a series? Is it are they just kind of like parallel games? Adam, what do we know about Voice of Cards and this new entry in this now series?
Yeah, so like no one expected this, at least not so soon. Like maybe maybe you could say they'd make a sequel in a few years or something, but not like literally 3 months later. But Square Enix says that this new game, The Forsaken Maiden, is a standalone story, and we don't know a whole lot about it. There are some character designs in the game that might indicate it might be something like a prequel or a side story, but it is not, based on their wording, it doesn't seem to be like a sequel where it's like you have to play the first game first. You can play either of the games in either order. So now I played the original, The Isle Dragon Roars, and like I think everything about like its presentation is cool in terms of the art, the aesthetic, the music, the way it uses a dungeon master like to narrate kind of everything from like this, like characters don't have voices in these games. You have like a narrator reading it like an audiobook sort of thing. And so I think everything about its presentation is cool, but I thought like as like a role-playing game, it's a little bit simple, it's a little bit easy, kind of straightforward. So like didn't really scratch that sort of like RPG itch for me, but it's a more casual game perhaps. The first game wasn't too long. It's like 12 hours if you're doing everything. So I'll probably check out the second game, pretty short for the genre, and kind of curious to see like how it might connect to the other game, because I'm sure it connects in some way, and it's just an interesting, thing to exist, like a sequel following up 3 months later. Like when has that ever happened before? I know it's not a sequel, but a second game. So yeah, it's coming out in like 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks.
I don't think I gave it, or if I did, I stated it really quickly. This Voice of Cards, The Forsaken Maiden, is releasing on February 17th for PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. And so when you were playing the Isle Dragon Roars, was there any part of the story that felt like it could be continued on, or was there an obvious place that this could fit in?
No, I mean, there are some things where it's like this character's background wasn't like fully and thoroughly like dotted like in every possible feasible way, where it's like explained everything about them. So it's like you could feasibly expand on that. but there wasn't any like lingering plot threads or anything in that game. So it wasn't clear or obvious that like, oh, there's going to be a follow-up. Not at all. But there are things like, this is a very, very minor spoiler, but there's a character in the first game named Melanie who is from like a mage clan of some sort. I forget the specifics wording of it. And they wear a very unique outfit. It's like this black like buckles and like pins on like outfits. And there's like 2 characters in the new art for the new game that have that same outfit. Where it's like, oh, so they seem to be from the same group. And some of the characters look similar to the characters in the first game. So it's like, is it the same character or is there something weird going on? So like that seems to be like something that might be the connection between the two. But otherwise, yeah, it's not like there was like a cliffhanger or anything like that.
I do like how for both the Owl Dragon Roars and the Forsaken Maiden, like immediately in the press release, they're like, by the way, do you like Nier? We've got Nier DLC. I'm just a little bit cynical on that, where it's just like, Nier is popular, right? Please buy our game. Here's Nier stuff. Maybe I shouldn't be so cynical on that, but the fact
it's just
that
cosmetics. It's like
cosmetics.
Rather than using the standard card design, what if you use a card design that looks like an Automata or Yorha thing?
Yeah, sure. But it's in like the 3rd paragraph of the announcement press release. It's like, by the way, Nier DLC, and I'm just like, come on. I'm rolling my eyes at that a little bit, but I get it. But I guess this will be another one for February, so we'll might not be too long. It obviously depends on who gets a chance to play it, but it might not be too long before we follow up on this and see how we think about it. One thing that I skipped over that I didn't mean to is that aside from the Pokemon Arceus guide features up on the site, we do also have a new preview. And that is something that Andrea did for us. And that is a preview of Ghostwire Tokyo. And I think this is the first time that we have mentioned that game on this podcast, because it's ostensibly not an RPG. But we got an invite to have one of our staff members kind of get a hands-off preview for the game, and obviously we accepted because we wanted to see, like, is there anything here we thought RPG fans would be interested in, things like that. And sort of, as everyone who follows the sites know, we kind of cast a wide net, and even with that stated, we often take the chance to talk about games we've been playing. Like, hey, we had a couple podcasts last year where we're talking about the Halo release, so we obviously don't live in a bubble here. Andrea was able to get the hands-off preview on Ghostwire Tokyo and wrote up basically her impressions on it with some sort of like, how much intrigue does it have for fans of RPGs, or is this just a shooter or an immersive sim, or what is this game if you weren't familiar with it? So we do have that preview up on the site. It's Ghostwire Tokyo weaves delightfully stylish combat with a haunting vision of its modern cityscape. So that preview is up on the site if you're interested.
In a nutshell, it seems like it's mostly a first-person action adventure sim sort of game with a little bit of like skill customization, which is, where any small RPG DNA might fit in. But otherwise, it's pretty much just action adventure, first person.
Yeah,
sort of game.
Sometimes you go into those previews and you're like, maybe we should cover this. Oh, maybe not. But
yeah, I mean, we were invited. Literally, we were invited, and I replied like, well, this game wasn't really on our radar because it wasn't described as an RPG. Like, that's not what they called it when they announced it. And they're like, oh, you never know. So we're like, sure, I guess we'll do it, and we did. And just to see what what they were showing. Take the opportunity.
And for those interested, that game comes out at the end of March.
Another March game. I don't think people expected it so soon, especially after not hearing anything about it for quite a while.
All right, for the next topic, did anyone play the PlayStation 1 RPG Shadow Madness?
I've seen it's covered on those games.
I only know 2 things about Shadow Madness. One, it was like designed by Ted Woolsey, the same one who did like SNES era localizations for like Secret of Mana, but so he's on it. And 2, it's apparently really bad. It was like it came after Final Fantasy VII in the wake of that popularity, and like, we can do that, and apparently it's just not good at all. And I have no idea why this company. I looked into it. Like, the publisher is like Pico Interactive, and they just acquired like a different company to try to like re-release old like classic retro games, and this was one they were able to get, I guess, rights for. So I guess It almost feels like literally scraping the bottom of the barrel, just like, here, we can re-release this.
So the lead-in that you're alluding to that I never quite actually said is that Shadow Madness will be releasing for Steam on February 15th, and it was obviously released on PlayStation 1 back in 1999 and 2000. When you said that had a terrible score, I'm trying to look up like the old, like, let's see, GameSpot gave it a 4.3 out of 10. IGN gave it a 7. So
Ooh. 7 back then was really bad.
Yeah, I do think, like, I don't want to just say, like, by the way, the terrible game Shadow Madness is going to be on Steam in 2 weeks. I do think that this is still a win. I still think that bad games should be accessible, just because it might not be objectively bad. There might be like a single component of this game that is really quite interesting, even if the rest of it is terrible.
Now, there's an argument to be made, like, is this actually a port, or is it literally just like an emulated version that you could do with, like an emulator or whatever? Yeah, and it's just like, I don't care that much. It's like if they have the official license to sell it, and this is how they want to sell it modern day, like, I don't think people are clamoring for an HD remaster of Shadow Madness. So, and they probably don't have the budget to do that. They're just going to release it as cheaply as they can, and it's available if you really want to experience it. This is an easy way to do it. Sure.
Okay, next topic is just alluded to earlier, and that is we got a new trailer for the Genshin Impact version 2.5 release, which is coming out the day after Shadow Madness on February 16th. I might hand this off to Jess or also Chow, who also is in the know of the Genshin Impact updates. This adds a new 5-star character, Yae Miko, who has been in the story but not playable yet. Some new story quests for Shogun, and some new events in the Enkinomiya region. So, Jess, what are you looking forward to in Genshin Impact 2.5?
Lots of my friends are gonna roll for Yae, just because, like, I have a lot of 5-star. I keep getting 5-star catalysts, and I don't have any good catalyst characters, so I'm like, maybe she's the one. But also, I'm also interested in some of the new events. Like, there is one about the new region. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this. I think it's Enkinomiya, where there's a I guess you get rewards for exploring the new area, and there's also, for some reason, they described as corrosive effects inside the area, which I'm assuming means that your character will take damage longer there in this particular space for some reason. So maybe there's a story behind that. But there's also a bunch of other events, like one that's like a dungeon building challenge where you can build your own dungeon for your friends to tackle, so long as you can also beat your own dungeon. And then another one where the traveler mixes drinks at Angel Share, which is the bar in Mondstadt. But because they're technically a minor, or like very heavily alluded to as a minor within the story, they're actually making coffee and other non-alcoholic beverages.
I like the idea of a dungeon builder. That sounds almost like Mario Maker, where it's like challenge your friends, but you got to prove you can beat it first or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what options there'll be for these different kinds of dungeons, but I might try it out. Other than that, there is another character that was revealed right before the 2.5 livestream, which is Kamisato Ayato, which is Ayaka's brother, who has been mentioned in story before, but not actually revealed. People were really, really excited for him, because they were assuming that he'd be a hot anime man. And I guess he counts, but like, people also made lots of fan art before, like, of what they assumed of what they thought he might look like before he came out. So I suppose that means he's coming at some point in the near future.
Wait, did they reveal what he does look like, or no?
Oh no, they did. It's his first face reveal.
Oh, okay. Were people correct? Were they in the right ballpark?
I mean, I thought he looked good, but some of my friends were like, I thought he'd be hotter, and I'm like, but to be fair, I think I asked people, like, really, then who is the hottest Genshin Impact man? And most people were like, Zhongli.
It's Ito, man. You forgot about the abs.
I was like, should I ask Chow what his opinion is?
You forgot about the abs, and he's also the guy that's voiced by TM Revolution. How can you forget about him?
I don't know, man. I guess people were there's just something about the Geo Archon. Maybe it's the godly presence.
everyone just loves the Geo Archon and Genshin because he is completely out of touch with reality. Because this guy basically tried to fake his own death, and after he faked his own death, he realized he doesn't have any money. So everyone just loves this dude about this guy because he is just doesn't know anything about life.
It's like, I don't have any money. Child, can I have more money?
But anyways, yeah. What's kind of funny about this kind of patch that's upcoming is all this content was leaked during 1.5 because this new area they're exploring is called the Chasm, right? And during those leaks, they said the Chasm is going to be coming in 1.7, so maybe that leak content's finally coming now.
I guess it's like, the leaks in this community are actually pretty good. A lot of the time, lots of them turn out to be true. So I guess I'm not surprised. But now it's official information. So now people don't need to say that it's allegedly, apparently, claimed to be happening.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about leaks too much. A lot of sites got canceled or deleted because of talking about leaks. So,
Oof. Well,
Well, so it might be possible that they were in planning to implement some of the starter stuff earlier, but they had a shift in the story progression or the progression of the. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I'm not as familiar with the game, but
yeah,
or
most
maybe
of the
maybe it's possible
Sorry.
that it was just like took that long for them to like they had some of the pre-planning stages done that far in advance. How long ago was like 1.5?
That's like almost like a year ago, I think.
When I say Genshin Impact 1.5 update details, it's like April of last year or so is when those first started coming out. So almost a year. Almost a year. Let's see. Yeah, 10 months.
My assumption with this game is they never expected to blow up as they expected, so they're probably like scrambling for development after that. So that's kind of like my assumption with the game.
So yeah, a lot of little games coming out in that like mid-February range. We've got the Genshin Impact update. We've got Shadow Madness on PC and a new Voice of Cards game like 3 days in a row, 15th, 16th, 17th.
I guess I'll be playing Shadow Madness.
Not to mention Horizon Forbidden West comes out on the 18th, isn't it? It's like, God, just so many games coming out soon.
And then after that, it's Elden Ring, isn't it?
Yep, Elden Ring's on the 25th, so it's like, man, like this is probably like the last chance we have to have a break from new games before the flood of new releases comes back. Because once it starts again, it's just not stopping until like the middle of April.
Yeah, I feel kind of bad because I feel like we're a little bit spinning our wheels here. Like Pokemon Arceus, I think is a game that's worthy of talking about a bit, but it's a little bit like, all right, enjoy the breather while we have it because we're going to be underwater in not too long. But speaking about Horizon, I didn't realize, like I knew it was that close, but I didn't observe that it was that close, that we'd be talking about it in potentially 2 weeks. Are we covering, is someone covering that on our site, Adam?
Yeah.
Quentin is.
Oh, cool. So I don't think this podcast time works with them. Them. So we will, I'm sure I'll get to it at some point. I don't know when the PC release is going to come out or whatever, but that is another one that we will certainly be discussing if we have.
Wait a second. Ryan, don't you own a PS5?
I do. I suppose that's an option. I haven't turned it on since playing the Yuffie DLC, but yes, that is an option.
Oh god, that's been a while then.
Mm-hmm.
You could find anything to play for your PS5?
I get what else? Part of me is like, what else has there been? I don't know.
Have you played the Demon Souls remake yet?
No, that's a good one.
Especially since Elden Ring's coming out, like get that off your backlog or something.
No, that is a good one. I'll have to pencil that in and fit it in somehow. Adam, I'm surprised for this next news bit that we're still getting news updates for Sword Art Online Alicization Lycoris. They are still adding DLC to this game?
Yeah, I guess. So they announced. So Sword Art Online came out in like summer 2020. So it's been a while, more than a year. It had a lot of free DLC that like there was like 4 DLC stories that each centers on a different character. And then they had like a paid expansion last year. And that seemed like that was going to be it. Like, all right, there's 4 free story DLCs and then a paid one. But then they just kind of revealed kind of nonchalantly, hey, we're going to have 4 more free DLCs, each on a different character. So those are coming at some point. They didn't announce when. So if you're a Sword Art Online fan, there's more for the most recent Sword Art Online game, which is Alicization Lycoris, how you pronounce it.
So the 4
I
upcoming
wonder if-
stories are based on Asuna, Ranye, Lifa, and Lisbeth. I actually know 2 of those, which I'm actually kind of, I don't know if I should be surprised or upset. I know who Asuna and Lifa are. I don't know the other 2.
I wonder if this is going to be like Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, where it still gets DLC 5 years later.
It's like
Yep.
maybe they weren't originally planning for this to be like a platform lifestyle game, but they're like, we've got this, and Sword Art Online has a big fan base. We'll just keep updating this, and people will keep coming back. So yeah, no new details. The paid offering that Adam mentioned called Blooming Up Forget Me Not was released last November. Throughout the last year was the previous 4 free storylines, and we've got details on the upcoming 4 about those 4 characters I mentioned, but no timing on those. So I'm guessing they'll just drop in periodically throughout the year. All right, we'll start wrapping this podcast up with our usual end slate of kind of sales announcements and new release dates. The sales announcements here are the first couple are both based on Pokemon numbers. Surprise that we got new numbers for Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. They are now based on the Nintendo's Q3 of the fiscal year's results at nearly 14 million combined. So I guess
Fun fact, the numbers they released puts it within like 500,000 from being the best-selling remakes in the Pokemon series. So, like, considering that this data is like a month old, basically already the best-selling remake, and there's a pretty high chance that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are going to end up outselling the original Diamond and Pearl, which would be a first for the series ever.
for a remake to outsell the original, you mean?
Yep.
And the last time we had an update was they sold 6 million within their first week, and now 13.97 million as of the posting of these financial results.
As of December 31st, end of the quarter.
Right, so it's been over a month since then.
Yeah, that's pretty typical for financial results. Is they come out like a month after. Like whenever you read data that comes from a financial result, it's basically like from a month ago, because it takes a while to like tabulate everything.
For comparison of the mainline game on Switch, Pokemon Sword and Shield are at 24 million. So it's still quite a ways behind those, but if we engaged with the other remakes, it has also outsold Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Or no, not quite yet. It's almost at Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which is at 14.33 million.
One thing that's kind of neat is that Sword and Shield, with the most recent sales update, have officially outsold Pokemon Gold and Silver, making them the the second most not really profitable. It's probably a bit different since it's like the higher base price, but it's the second best selling entry in the series behind the original Red, Blue, and Green.
That's pretty crazy.
That's pretty insane.
See,
And then-
people were complaining about the remakes.
Brilliant Diamond, Shine Pearl. I mean, well, I did the review for us, so I mean, you can just read what I had to say. It's like they're fine, but when people like grew up like playing Generation 4 and seeing the remakes that Generation 1 got, which had like massive additions to the game with like the Sevi Islands and like a ton of like cool like new features, and then Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which was similar and like really brought things up to snuff. And even like if people had issues with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, it's still like really totally reimagined parts of those original games. And then you see Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which is so
Safe.
sticking close, so faithful to a fault. I can understand why some people would be disappointed about that. Now, granted, maybe those same people feel a little bit better now that Legends Arceus is out, and it's like, well, this is a reimagining in many ways too. It's in the same world, just completely different. And I can understand, like, in retrospect, why they might have been like, let's have a faithful remake since we're doing something drastically different with Legends Arceus. But still, there were plenty of people that probably would have preferred like a more ambitious, like actual remake, and got one. Not to mention all of the bugs and the fact that the game has some pretty terrible input lag, latency and stuff like that.
Speaking of Pokemon Legends Arceus, we did get its first week sales numbers, also in the 6 million range. 6.5 million copies of Pokemon Legends Arceus. I mean,
which makes it the fastest selling Pokemon game ever.
really?
And also make the obvious consideration that there's only one version.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, you're right. Because if I just said that Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl sold 6 million across 2 entries and this sold 6.5 off of 1, I guess that checks out. Surprise, Pokemon sells. And I think it is.
It seems like Arceus trying something new, kind of roped in lapsed fans like me. Like I hadn't played Sword and Shield or whatever, and like, hey, this is something different. Let me try it.
Hey, it's the first Pokemon game I haven't down on.
I haven't played it yet, but I have bought it, so my number is there.
It's interesting though that not only is it the fastest selling Pokemon game already, but it's only a single SKU, so you don't even have those weirdos that buy both copies of the game, like buffing that number up.
Yep.
And I know that there's probably going to be some people that say, I'm not a weirdo for buying both versions of a Pokemon game. I'm sorry you are.
Well, back then you didn't have the convenience of like the online trading quite as much. You had to go to a hotspot or use a link.
That's what friends are for. Unless you're telling me none of your friends play Pokemon.
Well, now you just gotta get the. I was actually kind of bummed out when in Arceus I found like the trading kiosk or whatever, and it's like, you don't have Nintendo Switch Online. I'm like, oh, I can't do that. We did also get a sales update for another game that we talked about on the podcast last year, and that's Blue Reflection Second Light has sold 120,000 units, which again just kind of puts it into perspective of like the kind of the threshold that these different series are anticipated or expected to meet. Because for a Gus developed title, 120,000 is, I think, kind of pretty standard. The Ryza games from last year and the year before were the ones that combined sold about 1 million, which ended up being like a really high watermark for Gust. And that's kind of been what their threshold is now. But Blue Reflection Second Light doing strongly at 120,000. A couple release dates coming up. We got a release date for the new expansion for Guild Wars 2, End of Dragons. We knew it was going to be February because it took them so long to announce the date. People assumed that it was probably the last day of February. Turns out to be the case. Guild Wars 2, End of Dragons launches on February 28th. I will probably be playing this because I've kept up to date on this game, but I will probably not cover it because I'm just not inclined to. I will let you know if it's any good.
So
wasn't this expansion somewhat unexpected that they were going to make another one?
Yes. So I don't know how much detail to go into. Some background is that ArenaNet, the developers of Guild Wars 2, were trying to make some other game, and people actually found on some ex-employees like art stations and things like that a lot of media for like a Dune game or things like that, or a sci-fi MMO. And basically none of it was ever officially announced, and it was all apparently canceled. And they're like, shit, what do we have? Well, we have Guild Wars 2. We should probably support that game. So they cut off the last between expansion like live service updates, and they said, we're pausing these, we're going to release a new box product next year. And that's what this is. So it's kind of like a course correction, which means it might feel a little bit rushed, it might feel a little bit half-baked, hopefully not, but it's kind of like that's what they've got. And the NCSoft is the publisher, and for a Western market, that's pretty much all they got, because their biggest seller is Lineage, which really only does numbers in Korea. So both NCSoft and ArenaNet have a lot at stake here to hopefully have this do well. But you're right that it was kind of like a course correction for them.
I was just gonna ask, what about the story of this game? Is it supposed to be like Final Fantasy, where there's like a linear story going through?
It is linear. Like it's not like Elder Scrolls Online, where we talked about this last podcast, where each story is kind of self-contained within each expansion. It is the first expansion leads to the second, leads to the third. My understanding is that there is a lot more voice acting than Final Fantasy, but just a lot less story in general. Like a lot less to read, a lot less to play through. It's just basically a Final Fantasy 14 expansion is like half of a Guild Wars 2 season in terms of playtime. So it's a lot more brisk. It's a lot more fast paced.
I see.
I'm not saying that's necessarily good. I think actually it's to its detriment. It feels like it's like skin deep most of the time, or just goes too fast.
I don't know. I played it a long time ago. I had some good times of it, but I don't know. It just couldn't really catch my interest. But for me personally, I don't think I would touch a game from NCSoft personally. Just have like a really bad experience with like pay to win shit.
Didn't you play Ion?
Yes. A lot of bad things happened when they got taken over by Nexon, and then later on they got their company back, and the game was sort of slowly coming back together. But I think they already burned the bridges by then.
And I guess that is another one. They did the Ion Classic or whatever it's called in the last year.
Yeah, I was playing that, but like I said, I just don't have the time for it. It takes almost like a dedication, like a full-time job, in order to keep up with the game if you want to be like in the top end of the game.
Yeah, luckily for Guild Wars 2, that's not the case. Like I just kind of I haven't really played it seriously for like a half year now, but it's the sort of game where you can kind of really play casually as like your second MMO or something like that. We got a release date for Puzzle Quest 3. It will launch on March 1st for Steam and mobile devices.
Puzzle Quest is one of those games that the original came out in 2007, and it was like a mix between like Match 3 and like some RPG elements, and it seemed to kind of like take off on like as like a social sort of game. So not like really in our wheelhouse, but like as sort of like a broad, casual, like anyone can sort of play it sort of game. And apparently Puzzle Quest 2, which came out mid 2010 sometime, was also really well received. So I know there's like Puzzle Quest 3 is like maybe not one of the games that like people like us look forward to, but it seems like it has an audience of people who have played the older versions years ago, and they're like, oh, here's another one. And free to play might suit that need. As just a game you could just download and play. It's for mobile devices and PC. I don't really know much about it, but it seems like one of those games that's sort of a it's time waster, puzzly RPG sort of thing.
It's probably like deceptively popular. Like, did you know millions of people play this? Like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
And the final release date that we got an announcement for a Nintendo Switch release for the Neptunia Cross Senran Kagura Ninja Wars crossover game. So this came out late last year in both Japan and the West. We did put up a review on the site for it from Nathan. It will release on Switch on April 19th in North America and April 22nd in Europe. And this is, I think, something
it came out on PS4 last year, now on Switch. There is a PC version as well, no date.
Oh, so the PC version is also like, so we'll be coming back to this game.
It's coming, but no date.
Where we'll announce a PC release date.
Yeah, Idea Factory does that sometimes, where they eventually their games release on multiple platforms, but I guess sometimes they just don't. I don't know if it's just in terms of like what they are capable of doing, or if it's actually like strategic in any way. But they oftentimes stagger their releases, like one console to the next later.
And in Nathan's glowing review for the game, he said, it's a decent action game without a lot of depth, but its simplicity allows it to be fun in small bursts. Which, hey,
I think is what people want from those games.
Well, I was going to say, maybe that's what's well suited for a Switch release. And that kind of covers this for news this week. So a little bit light on the news front for the podcast. A lot of us are still just playing through Arceus, and between this week and last week, you've got 70 to 80 minutes of us discussing our feelings on that game. And we do also have all the guides coming up and a pending review, which will be up on the site once we have our final thoughts kind of fully filled out on those. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening to that. And as James alluded to earlier, we've got a lot in the pipeline to look forward to, including some games that we mentioned kind of slyly, coyly, are under embargo that we might get a chance to talk about in a week or so. You can see all of the guides, features, and the preview for the Ghostwire Tokyo that I mentioned up on the site at rpgsite.net. You can follow us on all the social media platforms on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube up at RPG Site. And we will be back next week with another episode of this podcast, as we seemingly are every week. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you then.